At 20, I thought life was about making the right decisions, choosing the right career, meeting the right people, finding the right passion. Everything felt like a fork in the road, and I believed every choice was permanent, that somewhere ahead there was a correct path, and if I miss it, I'd fall behind forever. I wasn't really afraid of failure. I was afraid of irreversibility, of wasting time I could never get back. So I overthought, I delayed, I watched other people move while I tried to calculate the first step. What I didn't understand then is that life doesn't reward perfect planning, it rewards movement. And most of what I was trying to protect didn't need protecting at all. Here's what I wish someone had told me. When you are 20, older people look like they have structure, like they have figured out a system that you haven't been given access to yet. Some are building careers, some are traveling, some are in relationships that look stable from the outside. And it creates this illusion that adulthood is a solved problem. But it isn't. Most people are improvising more than they admit. They're adjusting in real time, making decisions based on pressure, luck, timing, and whatever opportunities happen to appear. The difference you admire isn't certainty, it is motion. People who seem ahead are usually just people who started moving earlier and learned publicly through mistakes. Nobody feels ready while they are doing it. They just stop waiting for readiness to arrive, and that changes everything. At 20, I believed there was a version of me I had to discover. A hidden interest, a calling, a perfect direction waiting underneath the noise. So I kept searching for clarity, as if it was a destination. But clarity doesn't appear in silence. It appears in repetition. You don't discover who you are by thinking about it endlessly. You discover it by doing things and noticing what stays. Identity is not a buried object. It is a pattern formed over time. You don't find discipline. You build it by showing up on days you don't feel like it. You don't find confidence. You build it by surviving situations you once avoided. You don't find purpose. You build it by paying attention to what you return to even when nobody's watching. At some point, the question stops being "Who am I?" and becomes "What am I becoming through what I repeatedly do?" At 20, emotions feel permanent. A rejection doesn't feel like an event, it feels like a definition. A breakup doesn't feel like a transition, it feels like an ending. A mistake doesn't feel like something you did, it feels like something you are. But life has quiet correction mechanism. Time. Not the motivational kind of time, just ordinary passing days. What feels unbearable today slowly loses its weight when it stops being new. You don't need to solve every problem immediately. In fact, trying to solve everything immediately often makes things worse. Some answers only appear when urgency fades. Jobs you didn't get redirect you without your permission. Relationships that ended remove you from paths you thought were necessary. Even the worst phases usually contains exits you can't see while you're inside them. And one day, without realizing it, you look back at something that once felt enormous and realize it no longer occupies any space in you. Not because it was resolved, but because you kept going. Nobody tells you that distraction is not just about wasting life, it's about fragmentation. Your attention becomes split into smaller and smaller pieces until you can no longer hold a single thought long enough for it to develop into something meaningful. At 20, that matters more than you think. Because your identity is self-forming. If your attention is constantly pulled outward, your life starts to feel like a reaction instead of a direction. You don't notice it immediately. It feels normal. Everyone is doing it. But there is a difference between being formed and being saturated, between choosing input and being consumed by it. Some of the clearest periods of my life didn't come from consuming more information. They came from reducing it. Walking without anything playing, sitting without checking anything, letting boredom exist long enough to become uncomfortable. Because boredom is often the beginning of thinking for yourself again. And that is something no algorithm will give you back. There is a belief that confidence is a prerequisite for action, that at some point, clarity will arrive and everything will feel aligned enough to begin. It rarely happens. Most meaningful decisions are made in states of partial uncertainty. People don't start because they feel ready. They start because staying still becomes more uncomfortable than moving, and then something unexpected happens. Movement creates clarity, not before. You learn what you think by acting on it, not by waiting for certainty. The first attempt is usually clumsy. The second is slightly less. The 10th is recognizably different. Readiness is not a requirement. It is a result. And it only shows up after you have already crossed the line you were afraid of crossing. At 20, it's easy to dismiss small actions because they don't produce visible results. A single workout doesn't change your body. A single page doesn't change your mind. A single saved amount doesn't change your finances. So it feels like nothing's happening. But that's the misunderstanding. Change is not loud at the beginning. It's almost invisible until it isn't. Because repetition does something subtle. It shifts identity before it shifts outcome. You don't become a writer by writing one good text. You become a writer by being someone who writes repeatedly, even when it feels pointless. And over time, what felt insignificant becomes structural. The danger is not that small actions don't matter. It's that they matter slowly, and most people quit before they accumulate. At 20, time feels distorted. On one hand, everything feels urgent, like you need to decide everything now or miss your chance. On the other hand, life feels long enough to postpone anything uncomfortable. So you oscillate between pressure and delay. But neither perception is fully accurate. There is more time than fear suggests. People reinvent themselves constantly. Careers change, interests shift, entire identities dissolve and rebuild. Nothing is as final as it feels at 20, but there is also less time than comfort suggests. Years don't feel like they pass while you're inside them. They only feel fast in retrospect. And one day, you realize how much of your life was spent waiting for a version of yourself that was supposed to appear later. There is no later self that arrives fully formed. There is only what you do repeatedly in the present. If I could go back and speak to my 20-year-old self, I wouldn't try to correct his path. I wouldn't give him a perfect plan. I would remove the idea that he needs one, because most of what matters is not decided in a single moment. It is shaped quietly through repetition, attention, and small decisions that don't feel important at the time. So I would tell him this instead. Stop waiting for clarity to authorize your life. Pay attention to what you're already doing today, even if it feels small. Call the people you love without waiting for a reason. Do things without knowing if they matter yet. Move before you feel ready. And eventually, your lifestyle becomes your future. The scary part is that this happens whether you are paying attention or not. So choose the small things carefully, because they're never really small.